Yeah, I am not going to be painting anything today. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Deep Thoughts Zero Coats with me, Phil, the Glacial Geek. As you can see, I am not at my painting table, which you saw in that previous clip, because it is a mess in the process of trying to get everything together and getting ready to move. So it's just not going to happen. So today, I'm just going to have more of the deep thoughts and less of the thin coats. So I hope you guys will grant me that leniency. But I think it's a good topic that we're going to be talking about today. I think it's a topic that's kind of important and a lot of people want to know about. So we're going to be talking about how to prepare for a tournament. You know, there's a lot of things that go into preparing for a tournament that you have to get ready for. They're very different than just having fun games with your friends in the garage or in your room or at the local gaming store, whatever it is. They're very different, and you have to approach them differently. You can't just bring your models and hope that you can come up with a list on the fly. It's not going to do well. It's just not going to do well. So if you're preparing for a tournament, and this could be anything from a local tournament at your local game store to a bigger tournament like an LVO or something, like even the bigger, you know, the grand tournaments and stuff like that. It all requires a certain level of preparation for you to really approach them and have a decent shot of doing well in them. Even if you're not gunning to be just the top dog, if you don't want to necessarily become a #1 at the LVO, you still have to put in some effort and some preparation that'll help you at least have a better time. Because if you go there and you just get stomped over, you know, the course of 3 or 5 games, however it is in the tournament, it's not going to be fun. It's going to make you want to leave. It's not going to make you want to come back. It's not going to make you want to keep going into it. And honestly, I've had some great times at tournaments, and I think the tournaments are well worth the time it takes and well worth the effort to go in and do it, because you can really have a lot of fun. You can really have some really good games, really close games, and it's just well worth the effort to put into making it happen. So what's the first thing that you need to do to prepare for a tournament? Find out when there is one. I know that sounds simple, but it's you know, sometimes it can be hard to find out when there's going to be a tournament and where it's going to be. So your best bet is to talk to your local game stores, talk to your friends in the community, find out what's going on, find out if there's a tournament going on in a town near yours, because it might be a little bit of a drive. You know, it might be worth it to make that drive. So look out there, check out Facebook groups, check out websites for the local stores, check out just anything, really. Just call up local game stores, see if there's a tournament going on and when they might be going on. A lot of places plan them out. So I know locally here, each of the stores, the 2 main stores that do 40K around here, kind of work together so that they have it so that the first weekend, the first Saturday of the month and the third Saturday of the month are usually the 2 Saturdays that they have tournaments in, up here. So the 2 stores kind of trade it off to make sure that they don't overlap and that they're not going to be taken away from the community, because they want them both to be full of players to get there. So they work together, but you can pretty much plan on those being them. Sometimes they change, so it's worth keeping up. So I usually check that the beginning of the month, make sure I know when the next tournament's going to be at the local game store and prepare. Next thing you have to find out is what size is the tournament. What's it going to be? Is there something? Is it a team tournament? So is it going to be, you know, 1,000 points each? You have to bring a teammate. Are there going to be teammates that you can just get paired with? Is it going to be, you know, a 2,000 point Rogue Trader tournament? So it's going to be ITC ranked. Is it going to be looking to be to follow the missions that ITC puts out? What is it going to do? What is it going to be doing? What kind of mission is it? What kind of game is it that you're going to be playing? And how big of an army is it going to be? Is it 2,000? Is it 1,000? Is it 1,500? Is it something higher than that? Is it something lower than that? Something in between? You've got to find out what the specifics of the tournament is, because just because you know there's a tournament doesn't mean that you necessarily know the size of the thing. 2,000 has become, it seems to me, the average that seems to be going on now in 8th edition. It used to be 1850 back in 7th edition. So now tournaments seem to be gunning towards 2,000. That seems to be about right with 8th edition, the points variance that they have. So 2,000 points seems to be the average, but you want to make sure that you know that specifically. Because once you know that, then you can start to move on to the next step, which is figuring out a list. I've gone over a couple times about how to build lists, and I think that when you're building a list for a tournament, you're building a list very differently than if you're building a list to meet up with your friend on a Friday night. I think that what you're doing at this point now is you're looking to make a list that's going to win. You want to try to win. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that you have to go in there with 5 Storm Ravens and 1,000 conscripts, and that's the only way to do it. That's the only way to do it. It's the only way to make a list for a tournament. But it is, you're not going to want to go in there with a list that you don't think can do well, because at this point you're going to be playing a bunch of games in a day, and if you're getting stomped every single round, it's not going to be fun. It's going to be a boring day for you. You know what I mean? And you want to go in there with a chance to win. You want to have a close match. So even if you lose all 3 matches, if they were close, it's at least fun. You know, I'm not saying that you have to go in to win, but you want to go in and have a fighting chance. You want to go in with the chance to do well enough that you can stick around throughout the whole game and be able to have fun and play. Because, like I said, if you're just spending the entire game, the entire day, just removing models by the fistful and not doing anything back, it's going to get real old real fast, and you're not going to want to do tournaments. So making a list for a tournament is, you want to make the list that you're going to have fun playing, but that's also going to do well. So back at the end, in 7th edition, towards the end there, I like Terminators. I really like Terminators, but at the end of 7th, they just were not good, and they just wouldn't hold up. So I would make lists with Terminators all the time for my battle reports, for playing with friends, but at the end of 7th, they weren't good enough for me to bring to a tournament. So I brought lists that I thought would do well, that were fun to play, and I performed well, because I became a decent enough player with a list that was good enough that I could hang in there with most opponents. In 8th edition, I'm doing even better, and I'm making lists that are a lot of fun to play, that aren't just 5 Storm Ravens or 1,000 conscripts. So you have to start to think about what it is that you want to do. And I've gone over this before, but I'll reiterate here. You have to understand that you're going to a tournament and you have no idea who the opponent is. So, you know, if you're playing your friend and you know he has orcs, your odds are you're going to have a whole bunch of horde, and you're going to bring a lot of DACA. You want to have a lot of shots that can go down the board to just wean down his boys, so that when they finally hit you, that they're not going to be hitting too hard, and that hopefully you can survive it. But at a tournament, you don't know if you're going to be playing orcs. You don't know if you're going to be playing all knights. You don't know if you're going to play 5 Storm Ravens. You don't know if you're going to play 1,000 conscripts. You have no idea until you actually get there to what you're going to face. And because of that, you need to make a list that can handle all of those different things. So you need to be able to handle a horde in case you run into orcs, or 1,000 conscripts. You need to be able to handle 5 knights in case you run into that, or a bunch of tanks, or a bunch of flyers. Whatever it is, you need to be able to have DACA that can take care of those and have the ability to handle your opponents. Also, a lot of tournaments, especially if they're going in the ITC realm or even ETC, like they have missions that mix Maelstrom and the Eternal War mission. So there's usually an Eternal War main mission and a Maelstrom aspect to it. So you're trying to jump onto objectives while still trying to do things like grab the relic or hold Emperor's Will objectives, or just, you know, go for kill points. But you also have to try to jump onto objectives, achieve objectives through a Maelstrom system. And because you're trying to do both of those, you need to be able to make a list that can do both of those. So you're not just going into it knowing that it's only going to be kill points, in which case you would want to keep it down. You also have to try to jump on Maelstrom. So maybe you wanted to bring 5 knights, but guess what? That's going to be really hard to keep up with the Maelstrom if you're trying to do that, you know? So maybe you'd only bring 3 knights, and then you fill out the rest with bikers or jump troops or whoever it is to try to even it out, so you've got some guys that can go out and try to grab objectives. So you have to try to keep in mind when you're making all of these different things and all of these different lists that you have certain goals and aims that you have to make with them that are very different than if you're just playing with your friend, because you have to be able to do everything with your list. And if your list can't do something well, it's going to suffer, and you're going to have a harder time at the tournament than if you had taken the time to make a list that could do everything. So you have to make sure that you can jump on objectives. You need to make sure that you can handle like large wound numbered creatures or vehicles. You have to make sure that you can handle a bunch of hordes, you know, and if you can't handle some of them, you might run into them in a tournament and just knock your chances of doing well. So make a list that you think could do well. Once you have that list, test it. Ask a friend to come and say, hey, listen, I'm trying to build this list for a tournament. Can we meet up and have a game just to see how it handles? Because oftentimes until the dice actually start rolling and you start seeing how it works when you start placing it, the best laid plans don't necessarily work out if like once it actually hits the table. So having a practice game or 2 or 3, or you know, some of the top guys, like they just come up with one list and they practice it over and over and over and over again, preparing for those big tournaments to go to. And they use the local tournaments as their test for those. So they just play the same list over and over again. And honestly, with my tournament list, I come up with a concept, and if it does well, I'm going to tweak it, and I'm going to have a very similar list when I go off to the next tournament or the next one, until I find a system that seems good to me and I don't have anything that I want to remove or change, and I just kind of go with it. So, you know, when you're going into a tournament, practicing with your list is key. So you need to hit the table, play against a friend, ask them to bring the hardest thing that they can bring, ask them to bring things that you think your army might have trouble with. So if you think that you've got Horde's pretty well handled, you've got a lot of DACA, but you're unsure whether or not you're going to be able to handle some large wound models, why don't you ask your friend to bring knights? You know, why don't you ask your friend to bring a whole bunch of tanks? Why don't you ask your friend to bring a bunch of big monsters from Tyranids? Whatever it is that you think you're going to have trouble with, ask them to bring that so you can try it. So if you think you've got a whole bunch of las cannons, but you're not sure how you're going to do against a Horde, ask your friend to bring a whole bunch of boys. Ask your friend to bring a bunch of conscripts. Ask them to bring something that's going to test your list, so that if you run into something similar at a tournament, you know how well you're going to do, and you know how you're going to handle it, and you know what your backup plan is in case you run into something that you do have trouble with. So testing your list is very important. Once you've got a list and once you've been practicing with it, the next thing that a lot of people forget, and I mean I'm guilty of it as well, is make sure you know all of your rules. You're going to have your book there with you and you can look it up, and I'm going to get to that once we get into the tournament, but make sure you know your rules. Know what kind of rerolls you get from your HQs, know what kind of auras you get, know what kind of different actions and activities that your different units can do. So if your unit can reroll 1s against vehicles, make sure you know that. So if you get into combat with a vehicle, you get to reroll that 1. You know, if your captain is giving out rerolls of 1s, make sure you remember that, because those things are going to be the difference between winning or losing by 1 point in a tournament. If you forget something, that's going to hurt you and you're going to lose because of it. But if you remember it, you give yourself the best chance of your list doing what you expected it to do and to win. So make sure you know your rules. And, you know, read them, look them up, look them over and over again. Make a list of the rules that your guys have, especially in the beginning when you're making your first list for a tournament. Once you get into it, you can get very distracted, and it can become very distracting because there's dozens of other people playing games around you, rolling dice, saying out rules, saying what they're doing, talking about different aspects. And if you get confused and you get caught up in other people's things, it can be very easy to forget what your army does. So make sure you have them out there. So write down a list of things that you need to remember. You know, if you need to remember the captain, just write down the captain's rules on a piece of paper. That's fine. And have that with you. You know what I mean? And once you're playing the games, never feel bad about looking things up in the book. You know, even if someone's giving you guff about looking things up in the book because of taking time, who cares? They can wait. You have to look it up and make sure you're doing it right, because you don't want to cheat them and you don't want to cheat yourself. You want to make sure that you're getting everything right. So go through it, make sure you know what your army does, make sure you know what each unit does, make sure you know what kind of weaponry they have, make sure you know what that weaponry can do, so that once you get onto the table, you know what you're doing with that army. So now you've gone through, you've figured out what's going on in the game, you've figured out what's going on in the tournament, you've gotten a list, you've checked it twice, and you've practiced with it, and you know what the rules do. So now you have the core of what you need to go to a tournament with. So now the day before the tournament, 2 days before the tournament, make sure you have everything. Make sure you have all those models that you thought you had. I've had times when I made a list and I went to go check and I didn't have the models. I just didn't have the number of models that I thought I would do. You know, I didn't have enough bolter marines to fill out the tactical squads that I wanted to play with. I didn't have enough of the certain special weapon that I had put out there. So make sure you've got the models, because if you don't have the models, you can always ask a friend to bring some with them to the tournament or borrow them for the day. Or if you direly need to, you can go out there and throw them together so that you're ready. You can buy one and throw it together so you're ready to go at the day of the tournament. So now that you've had your list, you've practiced with it, you know you've got all the weapons, you've got all the models that you need. Now make sure you've got all of your extra stuff that you need to play a game. So make sure you've got your dice. Make sure you've got your tape measure. Make sure you've got your list. Make sure you print out your list. Print out at least 2 copies, if not more copies than that, so that you can give one to the TO when you get there so they can check it and make sure you're good to go. And you have another one that you can hand to show off to your opponent so that they can see everything that's going on there. You know, you can print out a battle scribe, but I prefer just to write it down on a piece of paper so it's clear, it keeps things concise, it shows what the different units are, it shows what weapons they have, and they can go from there, and it makes it easier. So make sure you've got your list printed out, make sure you've got your dice, make sure you've got your measuring tape. If you're going to a bigger tournament, maybe have some backups. So have another set of dice that you want to use, maybe have another backup measuring tape, maybe have some other things that can to go along with there. Make sure if you're going to a bigger tournament, maybe have some super glue with you so that if you break a model, which inevitably happens, you can glue it back together and you don't have to worry about it. It's not going to cause you stress, because you want to make sure that on game day that you're keeping yourself as calm and cool and collected as possible so that you're able to better think about the strategy of the game itself. So now you've got all the things you want. Something I would recommend is a tray, because you put all your army into your cases, you bring them with you to the tournament, you bring them out there, you get them all set up, ready to go for the game, and then at the end of the game, you now need to move those models to the next table that you're going to be playing at. And if you're moving them one at a time, it's going to take you forever, and you don't want to put them back into the case to bring them all the way back out of the case. So go to a local store, you know, like a Target, Walmart, or Fred Meyer, whatever it is that you've got, the local, you know, grocery / market store, and just buy like a tray table, you know, or tray. That's what I use. I use like a just like a lipped tray that has handles on it, so I can just put all my models on them and I can move them from table to table. It keeps it all together, it keeps all my models there and out of the way, and it makes it easy for me to transport during the game. So you know, I would suggest maybe buying one of those. It makes my life a lot easier. I'm sure it'll make your life a lot easier. Another thing that you can make sure that you've got your indexes, make sure you've got all of your data slates. So if you're running a Forge World model, make sure you've got either you've either got the actual book itself, or you've got the data slates printed out and hard copies of them. Because you know, if your opponent asks you to see it, which is completely reasonable, because if they haven't faced it before, they might want to see what it's doing, you've got to be able to show them. You've got to be able to show them what it is that you're doing. They can't just be like, oh no, trust me, this is what it does. Because why would they trust you? You know, there's no reason to trust you. If you could just show them on a piece of paper, they can see it and they're like, good to go, sounds good, and they move on. But if, you know, at that point, if you're just asking them to trust you, because the number of times that I've misremembered things, I wouldn't trust myself to be able to just remember it all. You know, most of the time it's fine, we're going through, but if there's ever a question, I always look it up. I always open up the book, try to find the entry and get the proper answer so that we're ready and good to go. So make sure you got hard copies of all of those things, or you make sure you've got, if you're using a digital copy, make sure your battery is fully charged, and bring a charging cable with you so that you can charge it during the day in case it gets run down. Because without that, you're in trouble. You know, you're not gonna be able to continue, and oftentimes if you don't have the rules that you need, the TO could disqualify you, and then that's gonna suck. You know, you went through all this process to prepare for this tournament, and now you have to go home. That sucks. So now you've got all of this ready to go. You've got your army, you've got your list, you've practiced, you've got all your materials. Now you're going to show up at the tournament. When you show up at the tournament, show up early. You know, a lot of times they'll say they'll start registration an hour before the tournament begins. Get there in the beginning. You know, don't wait to the last second to run in there, and then you're struggling. You're trying to get your list out to show the TO. You're trying to pay at the front. You're trying to get your army out, get everything together. If you get there early, you got time to relax. You can go buy a beverage at the front there, pay for your tournament entry, get your army out and ready to go, get it all set up, give your list to the TO to check it, make sure everything's good to go, and you've got everything ready to go, and you can take a breath, look around, see what other armies are around, so you can start thinking about possible plans of attack in case you run into them, and just be ready for what's going on. So if you get there early, you're going to be much calmer, much cooler headed, and you're going to be better able to hit the ground running once the tournament actually begins. And then once it starts beginning, you're just playing a game. And you've played Warhammer 40,000 before, so just go and play and have fun. And that's important. Bring a good attitude because, you know, there are going to be times, especially when you're first starting out going to tournaments, that you're going to lose. You know, everyone is bringing lists that they think could win. And there are going to be people that are going to bring 1,000 conscripts. There are going to be people that are going to bring 1,000 boys. There are going to be people that are going to bring 5 knights. There are going to be people that are going to bring 5 storm ravens. You know, so understand that you're going to be going up against some really tough lists, especially the bigger tournaments that you go to. The bigger the tournament, the more hardcore the lists are going to be. You know what I mean? And just because someone's bringing a hard list, they're bringing it to a tournament. The whole point is to try to win. You're trying to win, and that's what you can expect to see at a tournament. You know what I mean? And at the same time, you can still have a blast. I've lost many games in tournaments, and the only time that I've had bad times is when my opponent has had bad attitudes. And if my opponent starts to get salty, if my opponent starts to get grumpy, and they start to, you know, they're just jerks about it, then it becomes boring and it becomes awful, and it's the kind of game that you would just, if you weren't playing in a tournament, you'd be like, I'm done, we're good, congratulations, you won, I'm probably good for the night, thank you, and you move on. You know what I mean? But in a tournament, you got to play it out because that might be the first game of 3 that you're playing that day. So you got to keep going. You got to go, you know, get ready. So, but if you have a good attitude, if you're laughing, if you're smiling, if you're helpful, and you're considerate, then you're good to go. And being considerate at a tournament, it just means that you're kind. You know what I mean? You don't have to remind your opponent of what they need to do because that's your job too. You have to remember what your stuff is. So if you've accidentally missed the psychic phase and you've moved on to the shooting phase and you've already shot 2 different units, it's unreasonable to expect your opponent to let you go back and do your psychic phase at that point because you've moved on. You've moved on. The game's moved on. If you're playing with your friends in your basement, you can decide whatever you want to do between yourselves then. But at a tournament, that's unreasonable to expect them to do that. So just go, have fun, remember what you have to do, and keep it all straight in your head as you go along. You know, keep calm, keep collected. Don't be rushed by your opponent. Don't be rushed by anything. Make sure you're doing it right. Because at the end of the day, I would much rather have a game that only goes to 2 or 3 turns, as long as we got everything right, than get through 5 turns and look back and be like, we played this wrong the whole time. Because that's frustrating. To get to the end of the game and realize, oh no, we missed this. I was giving him a 4-up invul save and he didn't have that. It's like, well, that could have been game changing. And if you had taken the time, the 3 seconds it takes to open up the book and look and make sure that they have that 4-up invul, I would much rather that. And even if it means that we don't go to the end of the game and we get caught on time, that's fine. I'd rather that than have to go at the end of the game and just be like, we messed up. Because that's frustrating and annoying and nobody wants to do that. So take your time, be calm, be cool, be collected, and have a good attitude, and you'll have fun. You know, you might not win it all. You probably won't win it all. Only one person at that tournament is going to win win it all. So just go there, have fun, and try to win, and be good, and do your best, and you're going to have a good experience. You know, and the next tournament, you're going to be better able to tweak your list. You're going to be better able to build a list. You're going to start to understand the meta of your local area. You're going to better understand what's going on at a tournament. You're going to be calmer, more collected, and you're not going to forget things the more and more you do it. So the best way to do better at tournaments is to go to more and more tournaments. Face off against harder and harder opponents and develop your list, develop your skills, develop your play style so that you can do better at tournaments by going to tournaments. And have fun. You know, just because people are bringing hard lists does not mean that you can't have fun, and it doesn't mean that they're not going to have fun. It just means that you understand that you guys aren't just reenacting a patrol mission. You're going to try to beat each other at a tournament, and you're trying to win, and you can have fun as long as you go with a good attitude. You laugh at your bad rolls. You know, you don't laugh at your opponent's bad rolls. That's important. You know, like with my battle reports, I woo my good rolls, I don't woo my opponent's bad rolls. And if you keep that kind of same mentality with your own things, you can be excited and ecstatic about your good rolls. That's totally understandable because you've done it, you made it, you passed, you rolled those 5 6s you needed to keep that character alive. Yeah, you get excited, that's cool. But if your opponent needed 5 2-ups and he rolled all 1s and you start cheering and pumping your fist, that's a low move. Nobody's going to be happy with that. And you wouldn't be happy if your opponent did it to you. So Just act as you would like them to act towards you, and you guys are going to have a good time and have fun. So that's it. That's the basic advice that I've got. This is probably a little bit shorter because I'm not distracted by painting models. But yeah, that's the basic concept and basic things that you need to keep in mind. Make sure you have a list that you think is going to do well. Make sure you know that list. Make sure you've got everything you need. So from the models to the dice, the tape measure, the tray, all the different things that you need. You know what I mean? So make sure you've got all of that. Make sure it's going well, and you'll be fine. You'll be good to go. So go, be prepared, have everything ready, get there, have a good attitude, get there early, and, oh, this is Harold. Be prepared, and go have fun, and learn, and be open to learning. So if you get really stomped, even though you thought you had a list that was going to do well, know why. Know why you got stomped, you know? That's what's important, is you can go to it and have a good time, and be prepared to go and learn. And if the more you learn, the more you do better. So the next tournament you go to, you'll do better than you did this time, you know? And that's the thing, is you get better and better the more and more tournaments you go to. You know, I didn't win my first tournament. I have won tournaments since then, but I didn't win my first tournament. So go, have fun, and don't be afraid, because you might run into some jerks. That happens, but that could happen in a friendly Thursday night game at your local game store. You know what I mean? You just go, and don't be afraid, because most players are just players. They just want to go in and have fun, especially the local tournaments. They're just local players who want to have fun and just play a few games. Because worst comes to worst, you put in you put in the entry money, and you get to go play 3 to 5 games with with some people for a day, and just be a total nerd for the day, which is great. So I hope you guys found that interesting. Let me know what you guys do to prepare for tournaments. Let me know what you go through, if you have like a checklist that you make, or if you have a system that you do. What do you do to get ready to go to a tournament? What do you do when you get to a tournament? Let me know. Keep the conversation going down below. Do you agree with what I say? Do you disagree with what I say? Do you have a different method that you do? Let me know. I would love to hear it, because maybe you have some ideas that I could use when I get ready for tournaments. Again, I apologize I didn't have any painting going on, but moving sucks. So everything's a mess right now, but hopefully it'll get ready once I get down to Georgia. Hopefully I'll get things set up real quick, and I can get back to the usual process. So the next couple weeks probably have a little less painting than normal. But I hope you guys have all enjoyed it. I hope the conversation keeps going well. I have been Phil the Glacial Geek as always, and remember, Harold says hi. Until next time, have fun.